In the quiet of the evening, where shadows softly play, a fairy tale wolf sheds his skin, gently drifting away, with a twinkle in his eye and a heart full of dreams. He waits for the Friday night glow, where the magic redeems. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. He picks up a book, the pages worn and wise, every line a whisper under the vast skies, from far off lands where the wild things roam, to enchanted forests where the heart finds home. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. With every word he reads, he casts a spell of peace, transporting all who listen to a land where joy won't cease. For in these fairy tales, amidst the laughter and tears, the wolf finds his solace, he conquers his fears. As the night grows deeper, he serenades the moon with melodies that linger, a soft and soothing tune. In this sacred hour, where magic abounds, the fairy tale wolf writes love into sound. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. So if you hear a whisper beneath the silver skies, know it's the fairy tale wolf letting his heart rise.
Hello everyone, how are you all doing? I seem to have a bird. Yeah, that's Obsidian. He is in my stories. He doesn't do much right now since then. Hey Coda, thank you for lurking. Oh, Speep is in chat. Now, I know last week I said I didn't really want to start the Orange Fairy book before Halloween. What? Sid, get off the pumpkin. Oh, me. Move the bird. Get off the pumpkin. Just hop in there. Okay. Oh, no one cut. No one cut the bird. The bird is uncatchable. Anyway, we are doing the intro and a few things into the Orange Fairy book tonight. And I did activate... Well, first off, I have new emotes. Miss Dusk did them. I always feel strange saying Miss Dusk because I'm just used to just calling her Dusk, but I've got 10 new emotes. I have 5 of them at the follower level, and I put them in where I could. Just because since I got the updated model, I figured I needed updated emotes. So, I have updated emotes. I will try to load my older ones onto like 7TV whenever I can figure that out, because not that great technically if you haven't noticed that beforehand. And I do have a link for the book that we're starting. It's on the... yeah, it's in the chat window. But I don't really want to get too far into the book because I'm going to do some... probably just going to run pre-records next week for Halloween. I'll pull up my Lovecraft playlist. So I'll have that running so I can, take care of, hopefully, trick-or-treaters if they show up. There's new kids in the neighborhood. I've got to have at least a few trick-or-treaters. And if not, I've got a lot of candy to eat. But anyway. How has everyone's week gone? I know it's been a lot of ups and downs for me, so I always want to make sure you guys are doing okay. And again, I did say I've got Kel running the ads, which has got them running for my Stream Element store, which just, it's logo merchandise. You don't have to do anything with it if you don't want to. My Redbubble, I think I tried to do bookmarks. Bookmarks and stickers, and again, a couple of sayings and logos, because I really have very little artistic talent. But it's... oh, wait. I need to fix that one. Why do I have a moth? Oh. Thank you for reminding me to turn the fairy light on, moth. I have not done that yet. Can't jinx his dreams. Okay, where... which one was that? That was the highlights. Okay. I was trying to change the emotes in my messages too, so that is the archive one. Since I don't have the high anymore, I have the wave. Okay. That is back normal. I did not update my frosted tools either. Put that back to Dr. Seuss. I try to improve things every now and then just to keep things relatively up to date. And then I go and forget to do my updates. Okay, back to that one. Okay, all my messages should be back to normal. And I do have the jack-o'-lanterns up, so a little bit of decorating. I am still 42 people shy of actually reaching my goal for the year. But hey, it started at 390 something, so I've done pretty good. And I got the third book done. So that's one goal that I did. I got until December 19th for my associate anniversary. So, as I said, everything's doing fairly well. But let's go ahead and jump over to the reading screen. At least my library. Because this is where the fairy tales come out. I did. My chat box is a little high. It's hard to see it sometimes because it's... Nope. Bird's up there now. Okay. If I can ever work it, if I get a TTS spot, I'll have Sid do the chatting for it. Because who better to mimic voices than a raven? And I think with the last OBS update, I had to change which tracks my VOD goes to. So sound alerts on channel 1 now, because they said VOD is channel 2. But anyway, it is 9:10, so it is time to do some fairy tales. Believe it or not, this is the 10th book in the fairy book series that are actually listed as fairy book. There's other stories too, like Arabian Nights and other ones. But anyway, there are only 2 more books after this one. And before reading this one, I have narrated 330 something fairy tales from this series. So if anyone ever asks me if I've heard of a fairy tale, and I haven't, let me know. I want to read it. But anyway, Andrew Lang, as the editor of the series, always gets the wonderful job of doing a preface. But he has a tendency to complain about people not bothering to read them. So, of course, I have to read them. So the first thing for tonight, the Orange Fairy Book, Preface. The children who read fairy books or have fairy books read to them do not read prefaces. The parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins who give fairy books to their daughters, nieces, cousins, and leave the prefaces unread. For whom, then, are prefaces written? When an author publishes a book out of his own head, he writes the preface for his own pleasure. After reading over his book in print, to make sure that all of the U's are not printed as N's and all the N's as U's in the proper names, then the author says, mildly in his preface, what he thinks about his own book, and what he means to prove it. If he means it to prove anything, and why is it not a better book than it is? But perhaps nobody reads prefaces except the authors and critics, who hope they will find enough of the preface to enable them to do without reading any of the book. This appears to be the philosophy of prefaces in general, and perhaps authors might be more daring and candid than they are in Advantage, and write regular criticisms of their own books in their prefaces, for nobody can be so good a critic of himself as the author. if he has a sense of humor. If he has not, the less he says in his preface, the better. These fairy books, however, are not written by the editor, as he has often explained, out of his head. The stories are taken from the old tales by grannies. The stories are taken from those told by grannies to grandchildren in many countries and in many languages: French, Italian, Spanish, Catalan, Gaelic, Icelandic, Cherokee, African, Indian, Australian, Slavonic, Eskimo, and whatnot. The stories are not literal or word-by-word translations, but have been altered in many ways to make them suitable for children. Much has been left out in places, and the narrative has always been broken up into conversations, the characters telling each other how matters stand, and speaking for themselves, as children, and some older people, prefer them to do. In many tales, fairly cruel and savage deeds are done, and these have been softened down as much as possible, though it is impossible, even if it were desirable, to conceal the circumstance that popular stories were never intended to be tracts and nothing else. Though they usually take the side of courage and kindness and the virtues in general, the old storytellers admire successfully cunning as much as Homer does in the Odyssey. At least, if the cunning hero, human or animal, is the weaker, like Odysseus, Brer Rabbit, and many others, the storyteller sees little to intellect but superior cunning. But why Tiny Jack gets the better of the giants? And the fairy tales of no country are improper incidents common, which is to the credit of human nature, as they were obviously composed mainly for children. It is not difficult to get rid of this element when it does occur in popular tales. The old puzzle remains a puzzle. Why do the stories of the remotest people so closely resemble each other? Of course, in the immeasurable past, they could have been carried on about by conquering races, and learned by conquering races from vanquished peoples. Slaves carried them far from home and brought their stories with them into captivity. Wanderers, travelers, shipwrecked men, merchants, and wives stolen from alien tribes have diffused the stories. Gypsies and Jews have passed them about. Roman soldiers of many different races moved here and there about the empire and have trafficked in them. From the remotest days, men have been wanderers, and wherever they went, their stories accompanied them. The slave might take a Greek to Persia, and a Persian to Greek, an Egyptian woman to the Phoenicia, a Babylonian to Egypt. A Scandinavian child might be carried with the amber from the Baltic to the Adriatic, or a Sidonian to Ophir, wherever Ophir may have been, while the Portuguese may have borne their tales to South Africa or to Asia, and thence brought back other tales to Egypt. The stories wandered wherever the Buddhist missionaries went, and the earliest French voyagers told them to the Red Indians. These facts help to account for the sameness of the stories everywhere, and the uniformity of human fancy in early societies must be the cause of many other resemblances. In this volume, there are stories from the natives of Rhodesia collected by Mr. Fairbridge, who speaks their native tongue, and one is brought from Mr. Cripps from another part of Africa, Uganda. 3 tales from the Punjab were collected and translated by Major Campbell. Various savage tales, which needed a good deal of editing, are derived from the learned page of Journal of the Anthropological Institute. With these exceptions, and The Magic Book, translated by Mrs. Pedersen, and Adventure via Gilead by Mr. Edwald Tang Christensen, stories from Jutland, all the tales have been done from various sources by Mrs. Lang, who has modified, where it seems desirable, all of the narratives. There is a Ninetales in chat, so I will catch that, hopefully, because I like me some Kitsune. That sounds bad, but yeah, Kitsune are beautiful creatures. Murderous, but beautiful. Anyway, that was the preface. Oddly enough, he didn't sign it this time, like he did in some of the other ones. He just gave it by pretty lame. But anyway. It did mention that there were Rhodesian tales, and the first one looks like it is one. And it says it's from the Senna, which, honestly, is traveled as I may or may not be. I have no idea where that is. This one was passed on by oral tradition, so it will be interesting to read. So our first story of the Orange Fairy Book for this fabulous Friday night of fairy tales. The story of the hero Makoma, an oral tradition. Once upon a time, in the town of Senna on the banks of Zambezi, was born a child. He was not like other children, for he was very tall and strong. Over his shoulder he carried a big sack, and in his hand an iron hammer. He could also speak like a grown man, but usually he was very silent. One day his mother said to him, "My child, by what name shall we know you?" And he answered, "Call all the head of men of Senna here to the river's bank." And his mother called the head men down to the town. When they had come, he led them down to a deep wet pool in the river, where all the fierce crocodiles lived. "O great men," said he, while they all listened, "which of you would leap into the pool and overcome the crocodiles?" But no one would come forward. So he turned and sprang into the water and disappeared. The people held their breath, for they thought, "Surely the boy is bewitched and throws away his life, for the crocodiles will eat him." Then suddenly the ground trembled, and the pool, heaving and swirling, became red with blood. And presently the boy, rising to the surface, swam on shore. But he was no longer a boy. He was stronger than any man, and very tall and handsome, so that the people shouted with gladness when they saw him. "Now, my people," he cried, waving his hand, "know my name. I am Makoma, the Greater, for I have slain the crocodiles in the pool, where none would venture." Then he said to his mother, "Rest gently, my mother, for I go to make a home for myself and become a hero." Then, entering his hut, he took Nuendo, his iron hammer, and throwing his sack over his shoulder, he went away. Makoma crossed the Zambezi, and for many moons he wandered towards the north and west until he came to a very hilly country where one day he met a huge giant making mountains. "Greeting," shouted Makoma. You?" "I am Chisuas Mapeliri, who makes the mountains," answered the giant. "And who are you?" "I am Makoma, which signifies greater," answered he. "Greater than who?" answered the giant. "Greater than you," answered Makoma. The giant gave a roar and rushed upon him. Makoma said nothing, but swinging his great hammer, Nuendo, he struck the giant upon the head. He struck him so hard a blow that the giant shrank into quite a little man, who fell upon his knees, saying, "You are indeed greater than I, O Makoma. Take me with you and make me your slave." So Makoma picked him up and dropped him into the sack that he carried upon his back. He was greater than ever now, for all the giant's strength had gone into him, and he resumed his journey, carrying his burden with as little difficulty as an eagle might carry a hare. Before long he came to a country broken up with huge stones and immense clods of earth. Looking over one of the heaps, he saw a giant wrapped in dust, dragging on the very earth and hurling it in handfuls to either side of him. "Who are you," cried Makoma, "that pulls up the earth in his way?" "I am Chi Dubalabataka," he said, "and I am making the riverbeds." "Do you know who I am?" said Makoma. "I am he that is called Greater." "Greater than who?" thundered the giant. "Greater than you." With a shout, Chi Dubalataka seized a great clod of earth and launched it at Makoma. But the hero had held his sack over his left arm, and the stones and earth fell harmlessly upon it, and, tightly gripping his iron hammer, he rushed in and struck the giant to the ground. Chidubalakaka groveled before him, and while growing smaller and smaller, and when he had become the convenient size, Makoma picked him up and put him in the sack, besides Chiiosa Mapuri. He went on this way even greater than before, as all the river-maker's power had become his, and unless he came to the forest of baobabs and thorn trees, he was astonished at their size, for every one was full grown and larger than any trees he had ever seen, and close by he saw Chigwisamiti, the giant who was planting the forest. Chigwisamiti was taller than either of his brothers, but Makoma was not afraid, and called out to him, "Who are you, oh big one?" "I," said the giant, "am Chigwisamiti, and I am planting these baobabs and thorns as food for my children, the elephants." "Leave off," shouted the hero, "for I am Makoma, and would like to exchange a blow with thee." The giant, plucking up a monster baobab by its roots, struck heavily upon Makota, but the hero sprang aside, and as his weapon sank deep into the soft earth, whirled Nuendo, the hammer, round his head and felled the giant with one blow. So terrible was the stroke that Chigwisamiti shriveled up as other giants had done, and when he got back his breath, he begged Makoma to take him for his servant. "For," he said, "it is honorable to serve a man as great as thou." Makoma, after placing him in his bag, proceeded upon his journey, and traveling for many days, he at last reached a country so barren and rocky that not a single living thing grew upon it. Everywhere reigned grim desolation, and in the midst of this dead region he found a man eating fire. "What are you doing?" demanded Makoma. "I am eating fire," answered the man, laughing. "My name is Chi-Adoamoto, for I am the flame spirit, and can waste and destroy what I like." "You're wrong," said Makoma, "for I am Makoma, who is greater than you, and you cannot destroy me." The fire-eater laughed again, and blew a flame at Makoma. The hero sprang behind a rock just in time, for the ground on which he was standing had turned to molten glass, like an overbaked pot, by the heat of the flame spirit's breath. Then the hero flung his iron hammer at Chi-Adoamoto, and, striking him, it knocked him helpless. So Makoto placed him in the sack, Woro with the other great men he had overcome. Now truly, Makoto was a very great hero, for he had the strength to make hills, the industry to lead rivers over dry wastes, foresight and wisdom in planting trees, and the power of producing fire when he wished. Wandering on, one day he found a great plain, well watered and full of game, and in the middle of it, close to a large river, was a grassy spot, very pleasant to make a home upon. Makoma was so delighted with the little meadow that he sat down under a large tree, and removing the sack from his shoulder, took out all the giants and set them before him. "My friends," he said, "I have traveled far and am weary. Is not this such a place as would suit a hero for his home? Let us go, then, tomorrow, and bring in timber to make a carrel." So the next day Makoma and the giants set out to get poles to build a carrel, leaving only Chi-Uasmaperi to look after the place and to cook some venison which they had killed. In the evening, when they returned, they found the giant helpless and tied to a tree by one enormous hair. "How is it," said Makoma, astonished, "that we find you thus bound and helpless?" "Oh, chief," answered Chi-Uasmaperi, "at midday a man came out of the river. He was an immense statue, and his grey mustaches were such a length that I could not see where they ended. He demanded of me, 'Who is thy master?' And I answered, 'Makoma, the greatest of heroes.' Then the man seized me, and pulling a hair from his mustache, tied me to this tree, even as you see me." Makoto was very wroth, but he said nothing, drawing his fingernail across the hair, which was as thick and strong as a palm rope, and cut it and set free the mountain walker. The 3 days following, exactly the same thing happened, only each time it was a different one of the party, And on the fourth day, Makoma stayed in the camp when the others went out to cut poles, saying that he would see for himself what sort of man this was that lived in the river, and whose mustaches were so long that they extended beyond men's sight. So when the giants had gone, and he swept and tidied the camp and put some venison on the fire to roast, at midday, when the sun was right overhead, he heard a rumbling noise from the river, and looking up he saw the head and shoulders of an enormous man emerging from it. And behold, right down the riverbed and up the riverbed, till they faded in the blue distance, stretched the man's gray mustaches. "Who are you?" bellowed the giant as soon as he was out of the water. "I am he that is called Makoma," answered the hero, "and before I slay thee, tell me what thy name is, and why dost thou in the river?" "I am Chinduwao Malgiri," said the giant. "My home is in the river, for my mustache is the gray fever mist that hangs above the water, and with which I bind all those who come unto me so that they die." "You cannot bind me!" shouted Makoma, rushing upon him and striking him with his hammer. But the river giant was so slimy that the blow slid harmlessly off of his green chest. Then Makoma stumbled and tried to regain his balance. The giant swung one of his long hairs around him and tripped him up. For a moment Makoma was helpless, but remembering the power of the flame spirit which had entered him, he breathed a fiery breath upon the giant's hair and cut himself free. As Chindiba Magwili leaned forward to seize him, the hero flung his sack, or undergrow, over the giant's slippery head. Gripping his iron hammer, struck him again. This time the blow lighted upon the dry sack, and Chindiba Magwili fell dead. When the four giants returned at sunset with the poles, they rejoiced to find Makoma had overcome the fever spirit, and they feasted on the roast venison till far into the night. But in the morning, when they awoke, Makoma was already warming his hands to the fire, and his face was gloomy. "In the darkness of the night, my friends," he said presently, "the white spirits of my fathers came upon me and spoke, saying, 'Get thee hence, Makoma, for thou shalt have no rest until thou hast found and fought with Sakatrina, who has 5 heads, and is very great and strong. So take leave of thy friends, for thou must go alone.'" Then the giants were very sad, and bewailed the loss of their hero. But Makoma comforted them, and gave back each of the gifts that he had taken from them. Then bidding them farewell, he went on his way. Makoma traveled towards the west, over rough mountains and waterlogged morasses, fording deep rivers and tramping for days across dry deserts where most men would have died, until at length he arrived at the hut standing near some large peaks, and inside the hut were 2 beautiful women. "Greeting," said the hero. "Is this the country of Sakatarina of 5 heads, whom I am seeking?" "We greet you, O great one," answered the woman. We're the wives of Sakatarina. Your search is at an end, for there stands he whom you seek." And they pointed to what Makoma thought were 2 tall mountain peaks. "Those are his legs," they said. "His body you cannot see, for it is hidden by the clouds." Makoma was astonished when he beheld how tall the giant was, but nothing daunted, he went forward until he reached one of Saturina's legs, which he struck heavily with no endo. Nothing happened, so he hit it again, and then again, until presently he heard a tired, faraway voice saying, "Who is that scratches my feet?" And Makoma shouted as loud as he could, answering, "It is I, Makoma, who is called Greater." And he listened, but there was no answer. Then Makoma collected all the dead brushwood and trees that he could find, making an enormous pile around the giant's feet, and set a light to it. This time the giant spoke. His voice was very terrible, for it was the rumble of thunders in the clouds. "Who is it?" he said, "making the fire smolder around my feet?" "It is I, Makoma," shouted the hero, "and I have come from far away to see thee, O Sakatarina! For the spirits of my fathers bade me to seek and fight with thee, lest I should grow fat and weary of myself. There was silence for a while, and then the giant spoke softly. It is good, O Makoma, he said, for I too have grown weary. There is no man so great as I, therefore I am all alone. Guard thyself. And bending suddenly, he seized the hero in his hands and dashed him upon the ground. And lo, instead of death, Makoma had found life, for he sprang to his feet mightier in strength and stature than ever, and rushing in, he gripped the giant by the waist and wrestled with him. Hour by hour they fought. The mountains rolled beneath their feet like pebbles in a flood. And Makoma would break away, and summoning up his strength, strike the giant with Nuendo with his iron hammer, and Sakatarina would pluck up the clouds, would pluck up the mountains, and hurl them upon the hero, but neither one could slay the other. At last, upon the second day, they grappled so strongly that they could not break away, but their strength was failing, and just as the sun was setting, they both fell together in the ground, insensible. In the morning, when they awoke, Malumbo with the Great Spirit was standing by them, and he said, O Makoma and Sakatarina, ye are heroes so great that no man may come against you. Therefore we will leave the world and take up your home with me in the clouds. And as he spake, the heroes became invisible to the people of earth, and were seen no more among men. So, when he was born, he already had the sack and the hammer? Because his mother hadn't even named him. Yeah. Tall tale? I think so. This is another one from the Senna. Our second story for this fabulous Friday Night of Fairy Tales. The Magic Mirror. A long, long time ago, before the white men were seen in Senna, there lived a man called Gopana Kufa. One day, as he was out hunting, he came upon a strange sight. An enormous python had caught an antelope and had coiled itself around it. The antelope, striking at the despair with its horns, had pinned the python's neck to a tree. And so deeply had its horns sunk in the soft wood that neither creature could get away. "Help!" cried the antelope, "for I was doing no harm, yet I have been caught, and would have been eaten if I had not defended myself." "Help me," said the python, "for I am Minsato, king of all the reptiles, and will reward you well." Gopana Kufa considered for a moment. Then, stabbing the antelope with Sasagi, he set the python free. "I thank you," said the python. "Come back here with the new moon, and I shall have eaten the antelope, and I will reward you as promised." "Yes," said the dying antelope, "he will reward you, and no, your reward shall be your own undoing." Gopani Kufa went back to his kraal, and with the new moon he returned to the spot where he had saved the python. And Sato was lying upon the ground, still sleepy from the effects of his huge meal. And when he saw the man, he thanked him again and said, "Come with me now to Pita, which is my own country, and I will give you what you will of all my possessions." Gopana Kufa at first was afraid, thinking of what the antelope had said, but finally he consented and followed Insato into the forest. For several days they traveled, and at last they came to a hole leading deep into the earth. It was not very wide, but large enough to admit a man. "Hold on to my tail," said Insato, "and I will go down first, drawing you after me." The man did so, and Insato entered. Down, down, down they went for days. All was getting deeper and deeper into the earth until at last the darkness ended and they dropped into a beautiful country. Around them grew short green grass, on which browsed herds of cattle, sheep, and goats. In the distance, Gapani Kufa saw a great collection of houses, all square and built of stone, and very tall, and the roofs were shining with gold and burnished iron. Gopani Kufta turned to Insato, but found in the place of the python a man, strong and handsome, with a great snakeskin wrapped around him for covering, and on his arms and neck were rings of pure gold. The man smiled. "I am Insato," he said, "but in my own country I take a man's shape, even as you see me, for this is Pita, the land over which I am king." He then took Gupani Kufta by the hand and led him towards the town. On the way there they passed rivers in which men and women were bathing and fishing and boating, and farther on they came to gardens covered with heavy crops of rice and maize, and many other grains which Gopani Kufa did not even know the name of. And as they passed, the people who were singing at their work in the fields abandoned their labors and saluted Insato with delight, bringing also palm wine and green coconuts for refreshment, as to one returned from a long journey. "These are my children," said Insato, waving his hand towards the people. Gopani Kufta was much astonished at all he saw, but he said nothing. Presently they came to the town. Everything here, too, was beautiful, and everything that a man might desire he could obtain. Even the grains of dust in the streets were gold and silver. Insato conducted Gopani Kufa to the palace, showing him his rooms and the maidens who would wait upon him, and told him they would have a great feast that night, and on the morrow he might name his choice of the riches of Pita, and it should be given to him. Then he was away. Now, Gopani Kufa had a wasp called Zingimizi. Zingimizi was not an ordinary wasp, for the spirit of his father, the spirit of the father of Gopani Kufa had entered it, so that it was exceedingly wise. In times of doubt, Gopani Kufa always consulted the wasp as to what can be better done. So on this occasion he took it out with a little rush basket in which he carried it, saying, "Zingimizi, what gift shall last Insato tomorrow when he would know the reward he shall bestow upon me for saving his life?" Zingimizi, "Ask him for zip out the mirror." And then it flew back into its basket. Gopani Kufa was astonished with this answer, but knowing the words of Zingimizi were true words, he determined to make the request. So that night they feasted, and on the morrow Insato came to Gopani Kufa, and giving him a greeting joyfully, he said, "Now, my friend, name your choice amongst my possessions, and you shall have it." "O king," answered Gopani Kufa, "out of all your possessions, I will have the mirror, Sipao." The king started. "Oh, friend Gopani Kufa," he said, "ask anything but that. I did not think that you would request that which is most precious to me." "Let me think it over again, O king," said Gopani Kufa, "and tomorrow I will let you know if I change my mind." But the king was still much troubled, fearing the loss of Sipao, for the mirror had magic powers, so that he who owned it but had to ask, and his wish would be fulfilled. To it, Insato owed all that he possessed. As soon as the king left him, Gopani Kufa again took Zingimizi out of the basket. "Zingimizi," he said, "the king seems loth to grant me the request for the mirror. Is there not some other thing equal of value for which I might ask?" And the wasp answered, There is nothing in the world, O Gopani Gufa, which is of such value as this mirror, for it is a wishing mirror, and accomplishes the desire of him who owns it. If the king hesitates to him the next day, and the day after, and in the end he will bestow the mirror upon you, for you saved his life. And it was even so. For 3 days, Gopani Kufa returned the same answer to the king, and at last, with tears in his eyes, Sato gave him the mirror, which was of polished iron, saying, "Take the panel then, O Gopani Kufa, and may thy wishes come true. Now go back to thine own country. Sipao will show you the way." Gopani Kufa was greatly rejoiced, and taking farewell of the king, he said to the mirror, "Sipao, Sipao, I wish to be back upon the earth again." Instantly he found himself standing upon the upper earth, but, not knowing the spot, he again said to the mirror, "Sipao, Sipao, I want the path to my own kraal." And behold, right before him lay the path. When he arrived home, he found his wife and daughter mourning for him, for they thought he had been eaten by the lions. But he comforted them, and saying that while following a wounded antelope, he had missed his way, and had wandered for a long time before he had found his path again. That night, Zingi Mizi, in whom sat the spirit of his father, what he had better ask the paddle for next. "Bzz," said the wasp. "Would you not like to be as great a chief as Zato?" And Gopani Kufa smiled, and took the mirror, and said to it, "Zapao, Zapao, I want a town as great as that of Nsato, the king of Pita, and I wish to be chief over it." Then all along the banks of the Zambezi River, which flowed nearby, sprang up streets of stone buildings, and the roofs shone with gold and burnished iron like those in Pita. And in the streets men and women were walking, and young boys were driving out the sheep and cattle to the pasture, and from the river came shouts and laughter from young men and maidens who had launched their canoes and were fishing. And when the people of the new town beheld Gopani Kufa, they rejoiced greatly and hailed him as chief. Gopani Kufa was now as powerful as Nzato, the king of the reptiles, had been, and he and his family moved into the palace that stood high above the other buildings, right in the middle of town. His wife was too astonished at all the wonders to ask any questions, but his daughter Shaza kept begging him to tell her how he had suddenly become so great. So at last he revealed the whole secret, and even entrusted Zapao the mirror to her care, saying, "It will be safer than you. It will be safe with you, my daughter, for you dwell apart, whereas men come to consult me on affairs of state, and the mirror might be stolen." Then Shaza took the magic mirror and hid it beneath her pillow, and after that, for many years, Gopani Kufa ruled his people both well and wisely, so that all the men loved him. Never once did he need to ask Zapao to grant him a wish. Now, it happened that, after many years, when the hair of Gopani Kufa was turning gray with age, there came white men to the country. Up the Zambezi they came, and they fought long and fiercely with Gopani Kufa, but because of the power of the magic mirror, he beat them back, and they fled to the seacoast. Chief among them was one Ray, a man of much cunning who sought to discover whence sprang Gopani Kufa's power. So one day he called to him a trusty servant named Batao, and said, "Go ye to the town, and find out from me what the secret is of its greatness." And Batao, dressing himself in rags, set out, and when he came to Gopani Kufa's town, he asked for the chief, and the people took him to the presence of Gopani Kufa. While the white man saw him, he humbled himself and said, "O chief, take pity on me, for I have no home. When Ray marched against you, I stood alone apart, for I knew all the strength of Zambezi lay in your hands, and because I would not fight against you, he turned me forth into the forest to starve." And Gopani Kufa believed the white man's story, and he took him in and feasted him, and gave him a great house. In this way the end came, for the heart of Shaza, the daughter of Gopani Kufa, went forth to Batao the traitor, and from her he learned the secret of the magic mirror. One night, when all the town slept, he felt beneath her pillow, and, finding the mirror, he stole it and fled back with it to Ray, the chief of the white men. So it befell that, one day, as Gopani Kufa was gazing up at the river from a window of the palace, he saw again the war canoes of the white men, and at the sight his spirit misgave him. "Shasta, my daughter!" he cried wildly. "Go fetch me the mirror, for the white men are at hand."
"Woe is me, my father," she sobbed. "The mirror is gone, for I left Patao, the traitor, and he has stolen Sabao from me."
Then Gopani Kufa calmed himself, and drew out Zengezi Mizi from the rush. "O spirit of my father," he said, "what shall I do now?"
"Gopani Kufa," whispered the wasp, "there is nothing now that can be done, for the words of the antelope which slew you are being fulfilled."
"Alas, I am an old man, I had forgotten," cried the chief. "The words of the antelope were true words. My reward shall be my undoing. They are being fulfilled." Then the white men fell upon the people of Gopani Kufa and slew them together with the chief and his daughter Saza. And since then all the power of the earth has rested in the hands of the white men, for they have in their possession Zapao, the magic mirror. So a magic hand mirror of burnished iron. Interesting. I'm gonna have to quest for this. But for the meantime, it is almost time for the ads. So I'm gonna go ahead and run them. Get them out of the way, because, then we can get back into the stories sooner. See you in a few. Okay. The ads should be over. I'm still hearing them, though. I guess that happens when someone is getting a delayed stream. My timer may be off, but I can still hear the ads going, so. Anyway, welcome back. I hope you had a good little short break there. Because we are going to start into the next story. After I drink some more of my tea. I am drinking peppermint vanilla tea, so it's not as strong as the stuff you get in the stores, but still. Anyway, this is, let's see, it says it's a Pathan story told to Major Campbell. Major Campbell was mentioned in the preface. What did Campbell do? Ah, Tales of the Punjab. Okay, well, that makes sense. So our next story for this fabulous Friday Night of Fairy Tales. Story of the king who would see paradise. Once upon a time there was a king who, one day out hunting, came upon a fakir in a lonely place in the mountains. The fakir was seated on a little old bedstead reading the Quran, with his patched cloak thrown over his shoulders. The king asked him what he was reading, and he said he was reading about paradise, and praying that he might be worthy to enter there. Then they began to talk, and by the king asked the fakir if he could show him a glimpse of paradise, for he found it difficult to believe in what he could not see. The fakir replied that he was asking a very difficult and perhaps very dangerous thing, but that he would pray for him, and perhaps he might be able to do it. Only he warned that the king both against the dangers of his unbelief and against the curiosity which prompted him to ask such a thing. However, the king was not to be turned away from his purpose, and promised the fakir always to provide him with food, if he, in return, would pray for him. To this the fakir agreed, and so they parted. Time went on, and the king always sent the old fakir for his food according to his promise, but whenever he sent to ask him if he was going to show him paradise, the fakir always answered, "Not yet, not yet." After a year or two had passed by, the king heard one day that the fakir was very ill. Indeed, he believed to be dying. Instantly he hurried off himself, and found that it was true, and that the fakir was even then breathing his last. There and then the king besought him to remember his promise, and to show him a glimpse of paradise. The dying fakir replied that if the king would come to his funeral, and when the grave was filled in, and everyone else had gone away, he would come and lay his hand upon the grave. He would keep his word, and show him a glimpse of paradise. At the same time, he implored the king not to do this thing, but to be content to see paradise when God called him there. Still, the king's curiosity was so aroused that he would not give away. Accordingly, after the fakir was dead and he had been buried, he stayed behind when all the rest went away, and then, when he was quite alone, he stepped forward and laid his hand upon the grave. Instantly the ground opened, and the astonished king, peeping in, saw a flight of rough steps, and at the bottom of them the fakir sitting, just as he used to sit on his rickety bedstead, reading the Quran. At first the king was so surprised and frightened that he could only stare, but the fakir beckoned him to come down, so mustering up his courage he boldly stepped down into the grave. The fakir rose, and making a sign to the king to follow, walked a few paces along a dark passage. Then he stopped, turned solemnly to his companion, and with a movement of his hand, drew aside as if it were a heavy curtain, and revealed... What? No one knows what was there shown to the king, nor did he ever tell anyone. But when the fakir at length dropped the curtain, the king turned to leave the place. He had had his glimpse of paradise. Trembling in every limb, he staggered back along the passage and stumbled up the steps out of the tomb into the fresh air again. The dawn was breaking. It seemed odd to the king that he had been so long in the grave. It appeared but a few minutes ago that he had just descended and passed along a few steps to the place where he had peeped beyond the veil, and returned again after perhaps 5 minutes from that wonderful view. What was it he had seen? He racked his brain to remember, but he could not recall a single thing. How curious everything looked, too. Why, his own city, which by now was entering, seemed changed and strange to him. The sun was already up when he turned into the palace gate and entered the public Duar's hall. It was full, and there upon the throne sat another king. The poor king, all bewildered, sat down and stared about him. Presently a chamberlain came across and asked him why he sat unbidden in the king's presence. "But I am the king," he cried. "What king?" answered the chamberlain. "The true king of this country," he said indignantly. Then the chamberlain went away and spoke to the king who sat upon the throne, and the old king heard the words like mad, age, compassion. Then the king on the throne called him to come forward, and as he went he caught sight of himself reflected in the polished steel that belonged to the bodyguard, and stared back in horror. He was old, decrepit, dirty, ragged. His long white beard and locks were unkempt and straggled over his chest and shoulders. Only one sign of royalty remained to him, and that was the signet ring upon his right hand. He dragged it off with shaking fingers and held it up to the king. "Tell me who I am," he cried. "There is my signet, who once sat there where you sit, even yesterday." The king looked at him compassionately and examined the signet ring with curiosity. Then he commanded, and they brought out the dusty records and archives of the kingdom, and old coins from previous reigns, and compared them faithfully. At last the king turned to the old man and said, "Old man, such a king as whose signet ring thou hast reigned 700 years ago, but he was said to have disappeared, but none whither, where you got this ring." Then the old man smote his breast and cried out in a large lamentation, for he understood that he, who was not content to wait patiently to see paradise to the faithful, had been judged already. And he turned and left the hall without a word, and went into the jungle, where he lived for another 25 years of life in prayer and meditations, until at last the angel of death came to him, and mercifully released him, purged and purified through his punishment. You know, the same thing happens if you go into fairy mounds. So, what does that say? Other than the preface reconfirming that people share stories all around the world. But anyway, our fourth story for this. Is it the fourth story? Yes it is. Okay. Our fourth story for this fabulous Friday Night of Fairy Tales. How Isuro the Rabbit Tricked Gudu. Far away in a hot country where the forests are very thick and dark and the rivers very swift and strong, there once lived a strange pair of friends. Now, one of the friends was a big white rabbit named Isuro, and the other was a tall baboon named Gudu. And so fond were they of each other that they were seldom seen apart. One day, when the sun was hotter than usual, the rabbit awoke from his midday sleep and saw Gudu the baboon standing beside him. "Get up," said Gudu. "I am going courting, and you must come with me. So put some food in a bag and sling it around your neck, for we may not be able to find anything to eat for a long while." The rabbit rubbed his eyes and gathered a store of fresh green things from under the bushes, and told Gudu that he was ready for the journey. They went on quite happily for some distance, and at last they came to a river with rocks scattered here and there across the stream. "We can never jump those wide spaces if we are burdened with food," said Gudu. "We must throw it in the river unless we wish to fall in ourselves." And stooping down, unseen by Isuro, who was in front of him, Gudu picked up a big stone and threw it in the water with a loud splash. "It is your turn now," cried Isuro. And with a heavy sigh, the rabbit unfastened his bag of food, which fell into the river. The road on the other side led down an avenue of trees, and before they had gone very far, Gudu opened the bag that lay hidden in the thick hair around his neck, and began to eat some delicious-looking fruit. "Where did that come from?" asked Isuro enviously. "Oh, I found out after we crossed across the rocks quite easily, so it seemed a pity not to keep my bag," answered Gudu. "Well, as you tricked me into throwing away mine, you ought to let me share with you," said Isuro. But Gudu pretended not to hear him and strode along the path. By and by they entered a wood, and right in front of them was a tree so laden with fruit that its branches swept the ground, and some of the fruit were still green and some yellow. The rabbit hopped forward with some joy, for he was very hungry, but Gudu said to him, "Pluck the green fruit, and you will find it the best. I will leave it for you, as you have had no dinner, and take the yellow for myself." So the rabbit took one of the green oranges and began to bite it, but the skin was so hard that it could hardly get his teeth through the rind. "It does not taste nice," he cried, screwing up his face. "I would rather have had one of the yellow ones." "No, no, I really could not allow that," answered Gudu. "They would only make you ill. Be content with the green fruit." And as they were all he could get, Isuro was forced to put up with them. After this happened 2 or 3 times, Isuro at last had his eyes opened and made up his mind that whatever Gudu told him, he would do exactly the opposite. However, by this time they had reached the village where dwelt Gudu's future wife, and as they entered, Gudu pointed to a clump of bushes and said to Isuro, "Whenever I am eating, and you hear me call out that my food has burnt, run as fast as you can and gather some of those leaves, that they may heal my mouth." The rabbit would have liked to ask him why he ate his food so that he knew it would burn him. Only he was afraid, and just nodded in reply. But when they had gone a little further, he said to Gudu, "I have dropped my needle. Wait here a moment while I go and fetch it." "Be quick then," answered Gudu, climbing into a tree. And the rabbit hastened back to the bushes and gathered a quantity of the leaves, which he hid among his fur, for, he thought, "If I get them now, I shall save myself the trouble of the walk by and by." When he had plucked as many as he wanted, he returned to Gudu, and they went on together. The sun was almost setting by the time they reached the journey's end, and being very tired, they gladly sat down by a well. Then Gudu's betrothed, who had been watching for him, brought out a pitcher of water, which he poured over them to wash off the dust of the road, and 2 portions of food. But once again the rabbit's hopes were dashed to the ground, for Gudu said hastily, "The custom of the village forbids you to eat until I have finished." And Isuro did not know that Gudu was lying, and he only wanted more food. So he sat hungrily looking on, waiting until his friend had had enough. In a little while Gudu screamed loudly, "I am burnt! I am burnt!" He thought he was not burnt at all. Now, though Isuro had the leaves about him, he did not dare to produce them at the last moment, lest the baboon should guess why he had stayed behind. So he went around the corner for a short time, and then came hopping back in a great hurry. But quick as he was, Gudu had been quicker still. Nothing remained but some drops of the water. "How unlucky you are," said Gudu, snatching the leaves. "No sooner had you gone than ever so many people arrived and washed their hands, as you see, and ate your portion." But, though Isuro knew better than to believe him, he said nothing, and went to bed hungrier than he had been in his life. Early next morning they started for another village, and passed on the way a large garden where people were very busy gathering monkey nuts.
You can have a good breakfast at last, said Gudu, pointing to a heap of empty shelves, never doubting that Isuro would meekly take the portion shown him, and leave the real nuts for himself. But what was his surprise when Isuro answered, "Thank you, I think I should prefer those." And turning to the kernels, he never stopped as long as there was one left, and the worst of that was, with so many people about, Gudu could not take the nuts from him. It was night when they reached the village where dwelt the mother of Gudu's betrothed, who laid meat and millet porridge out for them. "I think you told me you were fond of porridge," said Gudu, but Isuro answered, "You're mistaking me for somebody else, as I always eat meat when I can get it." And again Gudu was forced to be content with the porridge, which he hated. While he was eating it, however, a sudden thought darted into his mind, and he managed to knock over a great pot of water which was hanging in front of the fire, and put it quite out. "Now," said the cunning creature to himself, "I shall be able in the dark to steal his meat." But the rabbit had grown as cunning as he, and standing in the corner he hid the meat behind him, so that the baboon could not find it. "Oh, Gudu," he cried, laughing aloud, "it is you who have taught me to be clever." And calling to the people of the house, he bade them to kindle the fire, for Gudu would sleep by it, and that he would pass the night with some friends in another hut. It was still quite dark when Isuro heard his name called very softly, and on opening his eyes beheld Gudu standing by him. Laying his finger on his nose, in token of silence, he signed to Isuro to get up and follow him, and it was not until they were some distance from the hut that Gudu spoke. "I am hungry and want something to eat better than that nasty porridge that I had for supper, so I am going to kill one of those goats, and as you are a good cook, you must boil the flesh for me." The rabbit nodded, and Gudu disappeared behind a rock, but soon returned dragging the dead goat behind him. Then the two set about skinning it, after which they stuffed the skin in dried leaves, so that no one would have guessed it was not alive, and set it up in the middle of a lump of bushes, which kept it firm on its feet. While he was doing this, Isuro collected sticks for the fire, and when it was kindled, Gudu hastened to another hut to steal a pot, from which he poured the water from the river, and planting 2 branches in the ground, he hung the pot near their meat, to put the meat over the fire. "It will not fit to eat for 2 hours at least," said Gudu. "We can both have a nap." And he stretched himself out on the ground and pretended to fall fast asleep. But in reality, he was only waiting till it was safe to take all the meat for himself. "Surely I will hear him snore," he thought, and he stole to the place where Isuro was lying on a pile of wood, but the rabbit's eyes were wide open. "How tiresome," muttered Gudu. Then he went back to his place, and after waiting a little longer, he got up and peeped again. But still, the rabbit's pink eyes stared widely. If Gudu had only known, Isuro was asleep all the time, and he would have never guessed, and by he grew so tired of watching that he went to sleep himself. Soon after, Isuro woke up, and he too felt hungry, and he crept softly to the spot and ate all the meat, while he tied the bones together and hung them in Gudu's fur. After that he went back to the woodpile and slept again. In the morning, the mother of Gudu's betrothed came out to milk her goats, and on going to the bushes where her largest one seemed entangled, she found out the trick. She made such lament that the people of the village came running, and Gudu and Isuro jumped up also, and pretended to be surprised and interested as the rest. But they must have looked guilty after all, for suddenly an old man pointed at them and cried, "Those are the thieves!" At the sound of his voice, the big Gudu trembled all over. "How dare you say such things? I defy you to prove it," answered Isuro boldly. "How dare you say such things? I defy you to prove it," answered Isuro boldly, and he danced forward and turned heads over heels and shook himself before them. "I spoke hastily. You were innocent," said the old man. "But now let the baboon do otherwise." And when Gudu began to jump about, the goat's bones rattled, and the people cried, "It is Gudu, the goat slayer!" But Gudu answered, "Nay, I did not kill your goat. It was Isuro, and he ate the meat and hung the bones around my neck. It is he who should die." And the people looked at each other, for they knew not what to believe. And at length one man said, "Let them both die. They may choose their own deaths." Then Isuro answered, "If we must die, let us
Put us in the place where the wood is cut, and heap it up all around us, so that we cannot escape, and set fire to the wood. If one is burned and the other is not, then he that is burned is the goat slayer." And the people did as Isuro had said. But Isuro knew of a hole under the woodpile, and when the fire was kindled, he ran into the hole. But Gudu died there. When the fire had burnt itself out, and only the ashes were left where the wood had been, Isuro came out of his hole and said to the people, "Lo, did I not speak well? He killed a goat who was among the ashes." Don't monkey around with rabbits. That's 4 stories already. Now, when is this next one? The next one is 11 pages. So, likely it'll be the last story for the night. So, our fifth and final story for this fabulous Friday night of fairy tales. Ian, the soldier's son. There dwelt a knight in the graining of the land of the west, who had 3 daughters, and for goodness and beauty they had not their like in all the isles. All the people loved them, and loud was the weeping one day, as the 3 maidens sat on rocks on the edge of the sea, dipping their feet in the water. There rose a great beast from under the waves, and swept them away beneath the ocean, and none knew whither they had gone, or how to seek them. Now there lived in a town a few miles off a soldier who had 3 sons, fine young youths and strong, and the best players at shinny that any country. At Christmas-tide that year, when families met together and great feasts were held, Ian, the youngest of the 3 brothers, said, "Let us have a match of shinny on the lawn of the Knight of Grang, for his lawn is wider and the grass is smoother than ours." But the others answered, "Nay, for he is in sorrow. He will think of the games that we have played there when his daughters are looked on." "Let him be pleased or angry as well," said Ian. "We will drive our ball to his lawn today." And so it was done, and Ian won 3 games from his brothers. But the knight looked out his window, and was wroth, and bade his men to bring the youths before him. When he stood in his hall and beheld them, his heart was softened somewhat, but his face was angry as he asked, "Why did you choose to play shinny in front of my castle, when you knew full well that the remembrance of my daughters would come back to me? The pain which you have made me suffer, you shall suffer also." Since we have done you wrong," answered Ian the youngest, "build us a ship, and we will go and seek your daughters. Let them be to windward or to leeward, and under the 4 brown boundaries of the sea. We will find them before a year and a day goes by, and we will carry them back to Grang." In 7 days the ship was built, and the great stores of food and wine were placed in her, and the 3 brothers put her head to sea and sailed away. And in 7 days the ship ran herself onto a beach of white sand, and they were all went ashore. They had none of them ever seen this land before, and looked about them. Then they saw that a short way from them, a number of men were working on a rock, and with one man standing over them. "What is this place?" asked the oldest brother, and the man who was standing by made this answer. "This is a place where dwell the 3 daughters of the Knight of Grang, who are to be wedded tomorrow to 3 giants." "How can we find them?" answered the young man again, and the overlooker answered, "To reach the daughters of the Knight of Grang, you must first get into this basket, and be drawn by a rope up the face of this rock." "Oh, that is easily done," said the eldest brother, jumping into the basket, which at once began to move, up, till he had gone about halfway, when a fat black raven flew at him and pecked at him until he was nearly blind, so that he was forced to go back the way he had come. After that the 2nd brother got into the creel, but he fared no better, for the raven flew upon him too, and he returned to his brother. "Now it is my turn," said Ian, but when he was halfway up the raven also sat upon him. "Quick, quick!" cried Ian to the men who held the rope. "Quick, quick, or I shall be blinded!"
and then pulled with all their might. In another moment, Ian was on top, and the raven far behind him.
"Wait, give me a piece of tobacco!"
cried the raven, who was now quite quiet. "You rascal! I meant to give you tobacco for trying to peck my eyes out," asked Ian.
"That was part of my duty," replied the raven. "Give it to me, and I will prove a good friend to you."
So Ian broke off a piece of tobacco and gave it to him. The raven hid it under his wing and then went on.
"Now I will take you to the house of the big giant, where the knight's daughter sat sewing until the thimble was wet with tears."
And the raven hopped before him until they reached a large house, the door of which stood open. They entered and passed through one hall after the other until they found the knight's daughter, as the bird had said.
"What brought you here?"
asked she, and Ian made the answer. "Why may I not go where you go?"
"I was brought hither by the giant,"
replied she. "I know that," replied Ian, "but tell me where the giant is, that I may find him."
"He is on the hunting hill," answered she, "and none will bring home save a shake of the iron chain which hangs outside the gate. But there neither is leeward nor windward nor the four brown boundaries of the sea is there any man who can hold battle with him, save only Ian, the soldier's son, and he is now 16 years old, and how shall he stand against the giant?"
"In the land whence I come from there are many men with strength named Ian," answered he, and he went outside and pulled the chain, but he could not move it, and fell on his knees. At that rose swiftly, and gathering up his strength, seizing the chain, and this time shook it so that the link broke. The giant heard it on the hunting hill, and lifted his head, thinking. "It sounds like the noise of Ian, the soldier's son," he said. "But as yet he is only 16 years old. Still, I'd better look to it." And home he came. "Are you Ian, the soldier's son?" asked he as he entered the castle. "No, of a surety," answered the youth, who had no wish that they should know him. "Then who are you in the leeward or the windward, or in the four brown boundaries of the sea, who are able to move my battle chain?"
"That will be plain to you after wrestling with me as I wrestle with my mother, and not one time she has gotten the better of me, and 2 times she did not."
So they wrestled and twisted and strove with each other until the giant forced Ian to his knee.
"You are the stronger," said Ian, and the giant answered,
"All men know that." And they took hold of one another once more, and at last Ian threw the giant, and wished the raven were there to help him. No sooner had he wished this than the raven came.
"Put your hand under my right wing, and you will find a sharp knife enough to take off his head,"
said the raven. And the knife was so sharp that it cut off the giant's head with a blow.
"Now go and tell the daughter of the king of Goring, but take heed to listen to her words, and promise to go no further, for she will seek to help you. Instead, seek the middle daughter, and when you have found her, you shall give me a piece of tobacco for reward."
"Well, you have earned the half of all I have," answered Ian, but the raven shook his head.
"You only know that is past, and nothing that lies before. If you would not fail, wash yourself in clean water, and take balsam from the vessel at the top of the door, and rub it all over your body, and tomorrow you will be as strong as many men, and I will lead you to the dwelling of the middle one."
And Ian did as the raven bade him, and in spite of the eldest daughter's entreaties, she set out to seek her next sister. He found her where she was seated sewing, and the very thimble wet from the tears which she had shed.
"What brought you here?"
asked the second sister. "Why may I not go where you can go?" answered he. "And why are you weeping?"
"Because in one day I shall be married to the giant who is on the hunting hill."
"How can I get him home?" asked Ian.
"Naught will bring him home but a shake from the iron chain which hangs outside the gate. But there is neither to leeward or westward nor in the 4 brown boundaries of the sea any man that can hold battle with him, save Ian, the soldier's son, and he is now but 16 years of age."
"In the land whence I come from there are many men with strength of Ian," he said,
and he went outside and pulled the chain, but he could not move it and fell on his knees. At that he rose to his feet, and gathering up his strength mightily, he seized the chain, and this time shook it so that 3 links broke loose. And the second giant heard it, and lifted his head, thinking, "It sounds like the noise of Ian, the soldier's son," he said. "But as yet he is only 16 years old. Still, I had better look to it." And home he came. "Are you Ian the soldier's son?" he asked as he entered the castle. "No, of surety," answered the youth, who had no wish that this giant should know him either. "But I will wrestle with you as if I were he." Then they seized each other by the shoulder, and the giant threw him on his 2 knees. "You are stronger," said Ian, "but I'm not beaten yet." And rising to his feet, he threw his arms around the giant. Backwards and forwards they swayed. The first one was upmost, and then the other. But at length Ian worked his leg around the giant, and threw him to the ground. Then he called to the raven, and the raven came flapping towards him and said, "Put your hand under my right wing, and you'll find a knife sharp enough to take off his head." And sharp indeed it was, for with a single blow, the giant's head rolled from his body. "Now wash yourself with warm water, and rub yourself over with oil and balsam, and for tomorrow you will be as strong as many men. But beware the words of the knight's daughter, for she is cunning, and will try to keep you at her side. So farewell, but first give me a piece of tobacco." "That I will gladly," answered Ian, breaking off a large bit. He washed and rubbed himself that night, as the raven had told him to, and the next morning he entered the chamber where the knight's daughter was sitting. "Abide here by me," she said, "and be my husband. There's silver and gold and plenty in the castle." But he shook no heed and went on his way till he reached the castle where the knight's youngest daughter was, sewing in the hall. And tears dropped from her eyes onto her thimble. "What brought you here?" asked she, and Ian made answer, "Why may I not go where you can go?" "I was brought hither by a giant." "I know full well," said he. "Are you Ian, the soldier's son?" asked she again, and again he answered, "Yes, I am. But tell me, why are you weeping?" "Tomorrow the giant will return from the hunting hill, and I must marry him," she sobbed. And Ian took no heed, and only said, "How can I bring him here?" "Shake the iron chain that hangs outside the gate." And Ian went out, and gave such a pull on the chain that he fell down at full length from the force of the shake. But in a moment he was on his feet again, and seized the chain with so much strength that 4 links came off in his hand. And the giant heard him on the hunting hill, and he was putting game he had killed into a bag. "In the leeward and the windward, and the full brown boundaries of the sea, there is none who could give my chain a shake, only Ian, the soldier's son. If he has reached me, then he has left my 2 brothers dead behind him." With that he strode back to the castle, the earth trembling under him as he went. "Are you Ian the soldier's son?" he said, and the youth answered, "No, of a surety." "Then who are you in the leeward or windward, and the full brown boundaries of the sea, who are able to shake my battle chain? There is only Ian, the soldier's son, who can do this, and he is but now 16 years old." "I will show you who I am when you have wrestled me," said Ian. And they threw arms around each other, and the giant forced Ian to his knees, but in a moment he was up again, and crooked his leg round the shoulders of the giant, and threw him heavily to the ground. "Stumpy black raven, come quick!" he cried, and the raven came, and beat the giant about the head with his wings, so that he could not get up. Then he bade Ian to take out the sharp knife from under his feathers, which he carried with him for cutting berries, and Ian smote off the giant's head with it. And so sharp was that knife that with one blow the giant's head just rolled to the ground. "Rest now this night also," said the raven, "and tomorrow you shall take the knight's 3 daughters to the edge of the rocks that leads to the lower world. But take heed to go down first yourself, and let them follow after you. And before I go, you shall give me another piece of tobacco." Bird's got a habit. Take it all, answered Ian, for you have well earned it.
No, but give me a piece. You know what is behind you, but you have no knowledge of what is before you.
And picking up tobacco in his beak, the raven flew away. So the next morning the knight's youngest daughter loaded asses with all the silver and gold to be found in the castle, and she set out with Ian the soldier's son for the house where his second sister was waiting to see what would befall. She also had asses with precious things to carry away, and so had the eldest sister, when they reached the castle where she had begun kept as a prisoner. Together they all rode to the edge of the rock, and then Ian lay down and shouted, and the basket was drawn up. And in it they got one by one, and were let down to the bottom. When the last one was gone, Ian should have gone also, but the left three sisters come after him. But he had forgotten the raven's warning, and bade them go first, lest some accident should happen. Only he begged the youngest sister to let him keep a little gold cap, which, like the others, she wore on her head. Then he helped them, each in their turn, into the basket. Long he waited, but wait as he might, the baskets never came back, for in their joy of being free, the knight's daughters had forgotten all about Ian, and had set sail in the ship that had brought him and his brothers to the land of Guring. At last he began to understand what had happened to him, and while he was taking counsel with himself what had best be done, the raven came to him.
You did not heed my words,
said the raven gravely. No, I did not, and therefore I am here, answered Ian, bowing his head.
The past cannot be undone, went the raven. He that will not take counsel will take combat. This night you will sleep in the giant's castle, but now you shall give me a piece of tobacco.
I will, but pray you, stay in the castle with me.
That I may not do, but on the morrow I will come.
And on the morrow he did, and he bade Ian to go into the giant's stable, where a horse stood, whom mattered nothing if she journeyed over land or sea.
Be careful, he added, how you enter the stable, for the door swings without ceasing to and fro, and if it touches you, it will cause you to cry out. I will go first and show you the way.
Go, said Ian, and the raven gave a bob and a hop, and though he was quite safe, the door slammed on a feather of his tail, and he screamed loudly. Then Ian took a run backwards, then a run forwards, and made a spring, and the door caught one of his feet, and he felt fainting on the stable floor. Quickly the raven pounced on him, and picked him up in his beak and claws, and carried him to the castle, where he laid ointment on his foot, till it was as well as ever.
Now come out to walk, said the raven, but take heed that you wonder not to aught may behold, neither you touch anything. And first, give me a piece of tobacco.
Many strange things did Ian behold on that island, more than he had thought for. In a glen lay 3 heroes stretched on their backs, done to death by 3 spears that had struck at their breasts. But he kept his counsel and spake nothing, only he pulled out the spears, and the men sat up and said, You are Ian the soldier's son? And the spell was laid upon you to travel in our company to the cave of the Black Fisherman. So together they went till they reached the cave, and one of the men entered to see what should be found there. And he beheld a hag, horrid to look upon, seated on a rock, and before he could speak she struck him with her club, and changed him to a stone, and in like manner she dealt with the other 3. At last Ian entered.
These men are under spells, said the witch, and alive they can never be till you have anointed them with the water which you must fetch from the island of big women. See that you do not tarry.
And Ian turned away with a sinking heart, for he would fain have followed the youngest daughter of the Knight of Guring.
You did not obey my counsel, said the raven, hopping towards him, and so trouble has come upon you. But sleep now. Tomorrow you shall mount the horse which is in the giant's stable, that can gallop over land and sea. When you reach the island of big women, 16 boys will come out to meet you, and will offer you horse fruit. Wish not to take the saddle and bridle from her, but see that they do not touch her, and give her any fruit yourself. And yourself lead her to the stable, and shut the door. And be sure that for every turn of the lock given by the 6 stable lads, you give 1. And you shall break free
And now you shall break me off a piece of tobacco.
The next morning, Ian rose and led the horse from the stable, without the door hurting him, and rode across the sea to the island of the big women, where 16 stable lads met him. Each one offered to take his horse and to feed her, and to put her in the stable, but Ian only answered, "I will put her in and see to her." And thus he did. And while he was rubbing his sides, the horse said to him, "Every kind of drink they offer you, but see you take none, save whey and water only." And so it fell out, and when 16 stable boys saw that he would drink nothing, they drank it all themselves, and one by one lay stretched out upon the board. So Ian felt pleased in his heart that he had withstood their fair words, and he forgot the counsel the horse had likewise given him, saying, "Beware lest you fall asleep, and not slip the chance of getting home again." For a while the lads were sleeping, sweet music reached his ears, and he slept also. When this came to pass, the steed broke through the stable door and kicked him and woke him roughly. "You did not listen to my counsel," she said, "and who knows if it is not for late to win over the sea? But first take the sword which hangs on the wall and cut off the heads of the 16 grooms." Filled with shame at being once more proved heedless, Ian rose and did as the horse bade him, and then he ran to the well and poured the water into a leather bottle, and leaping on the horse's back, rode over the sea where the raven was waiting for him.
"Lead the horse into the stable," said the raven, "and lay down yourself to sleep, for tomorrow you must make the heroes living in, and must slay the hag. And care not to be so foolish tomorrow as you were today."
"Stay with me for company," begged Ian, but the raven shook his head and flew away. In the morning Ian awoke and hastened to the cave where the old hag was sitting, and struck her dead as she was, before she could cast the spells on him. Next he sprinkled the water over the heroes, who came to life again, and together they journeyed to the other side of the island, where the raven met them.
"At last you have followed the counsel that was given you," said the raven, "and now, having learned wisdom, you may go home to the Grewing. There you will find the knight's 2 eldest daughters are to be wedded today to your 2 brothers, and the youngest to the chief of the men on the rock. But her gold cap you shall give me and if you want it, you will only have to think of me, and I will bring it to you. And one more warning I give you. If anyone asks for whence you came, answer that you come from behind you, and if anyone asks whether you're going, say you're going before you."
Ian mounted the horse and set her face to the sea, and her back to the shore, and off she was, away and away until she reached the church of Grang, and there, in a field of grass, bathed with a well of water, one leaped down from the saddle. "No," the horse said to him, "draw your sword and cut off my head." But he answered,
"Poor thanks it would have been for all the help that have come from you."
"It is the only way I can free myself from the spells the giants laid on me and the raven. For I was a girl who had a youth wooing me. I have no fears, but do as I have said." Then Ian drew his sword as she bade him, and cut off her head, and went about his way looking backwards. As he walked, he saw a woman standing at her house door. She asked him whence he had come, and he answered as the raven had told him, and that he came from behind. Next she inquired whether he was going, and this time he made reply that he was going before him, but that he was thirsty and would like a drink.
"You are an impudent fellow," said the woman, "but you shall have a drink."
So she gave him some milk, which was all she had till her husband came home.
"Where is your husband?" asked Ian.
The woman answered him,
"He is at the knight's castle, trying on a fashioned gold and silver into a cap for the youngest daughter, like unto the caps her sisters wear. Such as are not to be found in this land. But see, he is returning, and we shall now hear how he sped."
And at the gate the man entered. Beholding the strange youth, he said to him, "What is your trade, boy?" "I am a smith," replied Ian, and the man answered, "Good luck has befallen me, then, for you can help me make a cap for the knight's daughter." "You cannot make that cap. You must know it," said Ian. "Well, I must try," replied the man, "or I shall be hanged on a tree, so it were a good deed to help me." I will help if I can, said Ian. But keep the gold and silver for yourself, and knock me into the smithy tonight, and I will work my spells. So the man, wondering to himself, locked him in. As soon as the key was turned in the lock, Ian wished for the raven, and the raven came to him, carrying the cap in his mouth. Now take off my head, said the raven. But Ian answered, Poor thanks were that for all the help you've given me. It is the only thanks you can give me, said the raven, for I was a youth like yourself before the spells were laid on me. Then Ian drew his sword and cut off the head of the raven, and shut his eyes so that he may see nothing. After that he lay down and slept till morning dawned. Then the man came and unlocked the door, and shook the sleeper. Here's a cap, said Ian drowsily, drawing it from under his pillow, and he fell asleep again directly. The sun was high in the heavens when he woke again, and this time he beheld a tall, brown-haired youth standing behind him. I am the raven, said the youth, and the spells are broken, but now get up and come with me. And then the two went together to the place where Ian had left the dead horse. But no horse was there now, only a beautiful maiden. I am the horse, said she, and the spells are broken. And she and the youth went away together. In the meantime, the smith carried the cap to the castle, and bade a servant belonging to the king's youngest daughter bear it to her mistress. When the girl's eyes fell upon it, she cried out, He speaks false! He does not bring me the man who really made the cap. I will hang him on the tree beside my window. The servant was filled with fear at her words, and hastened to hold the smith, who ran as fast as he could to seek for Ian. When he found him, he brought him to the castle, and the girl was struck dumb with joy. Then she declared that she would marry nobody else. At this, someone fetched to her the knighted ring, and when Ian told his tale, he vowed that the maiden was right, and that his elder daughter should never wed men who had not only taken glory to themselves, which did not belong to them, but they had left the real doer of the fates to his fair. And the wedding guest said that the knight had spoken well, and the two elder brothers were fain to leave the country, for no one would converse with them. All right, then. Well, we have officially started the Orange Fairy book. So what do you think? Good, bad, indifferent? I said I probably won't do a live stream next time. Well, next Friday anyway, because Halloween. So I'll probably set up the theater and play the Lovecraft stories. Yeah. So let us see who is on to raid. Or if anyone has any suggestions, I'm always open. Let's see what elk commutation is doing. I'm doing Grim Fairy Tales, but
Okay. He's kind of doing them random. So, what I do see is people doing art. We do like us some art in this channel. I was just thinking, I have not redone the raid messengers yet. I guess I need to fix those. Okay, well, the subscriber one hasn't changed. Well, it changed, it updated itself. But the follower one is still... I wish follow emotes would allow you to use them outside of the channel. I really do. But for now, we will make do with what we do. And I will let Kel say who we are rating. What kind of message is she going to put up? Okay. Okay, her raid introduction is like 3 paragraphs. We can't really do that. Well, we raid Dusk anyway. So, have a wonderful night, everyone. And hopefully, I'll see you Monday. Which I believe I'll be doing more Baldur's Gate with crowd control on. Provided the computer works. So, see you then.
In the hollow of the night, shadows weave and twist. The wolf has told his stories, wrapped in mystic mist, lurking in the silence where the echoes softly play. The echoes of forgotten tales, dimming as they sway. The hours drip like candle wax, slowly melting gold. Lands of frost and twilight, secrets yet untold. The forest breathes a shiver, its ancient heartbeats thrum. Underneath the silver glow, the wild whispers come. Time to close the book, let the pages fall. You've roamed the winding paths, now heed the twilight.